I'm pressing record now.
Good, 7 o'clock and we are live on Tuesday, November the 5th. In Council Chambers, 400 Center. Can I have a call to order? Thank you. And adoption of the agenda. It is before you. And I have some changes I'm going to look for nods to. And for Norm, under council reports, you have IC and EV station. Yes?
Fred, were you going to add to that?
That's fine. Okay. Fred, you guys can piggyback on that.
Sorry, under committees?
Council?
Either or, which you like,
Or
Peter?
council, whatever.
Council, let's do council.
Okay.
Because my eyes don't drift that low. Okay, 2 is IC and EV. And thank you on that one. And the next one is Councillor Abbott. You are in here for 2 things. One, I think on council reports, we'll go you number 3 on the climate action, if that's fine.
Sure.
Okay. And where do you want to fit cell tower in here?
Can we just do it after that, number 4? It's just going to be verbal.
Reports,
Yep.
number 4. Okay. And given my bet with the CFO,
Sorry,
holding you.
talk about council reports?
Council reports, number 3 is climate action
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Councillor Abbott, number 4 is, I'm calling it the cell tower for abbreviation. And back to the $10, oh, sorry, $1, but $1 is like 100. And apparently I have a gavel, so we will hit that 10 o'clock.
And
All right, so I think I've got, let me just, I'm looking, so yes, CAO, do you have anything? Oh, sorry, one more thing. If we can do the 8 reports instead of staff A and the CAO, if we could proudly have the Public Works Manager apprise us on the Harvey tank, and then everything else goes down consecutively.
I was going to add a couple of things
Oh.
as particular numbers and then speak
Okay.
to one of them first. And
I'll delete that and you go.
So how about if I go?
You go.
Under staff 8A5, CAO verbal Lady Death survey of residents.
Such a good name.
I had forgotten to add that in,
Thank
so
you.
my apologies on that. And I would ask that we actually just do that briefly, it's very brief, before we get into 8A1, which is my commercial filming
Do you want to
policy.
bump that to 1?
No, it's 5 on the list, but just we'll hear it first.
You're
It
playing
just-
games with me, aren't
It
you?
just makes it easier to keep track of the, things stay what they are in the agenda, so you follow them in the minutes.
You play a lot of
They-
chess, don't
they-
you?
They
Okay,
become,
fine.
they stay the same numbers.
Okay, let me see if I do that little arrow over
Just
here. Okay,
easier
fine.
to track that way. And then 8A6 would be CAO verbal update SBA tower consultation launch.
Okie dokie.
So,
We're doubling up on the tower, but
Yes.
that's fine.
yeah, so what's fine, I can add my comments at that point.
Well, we can delete you if you want, Councillor Abbott. That's your call. Otherwise, you get last word.
Sure.
Okay?
I'll move it up, I'll just speak at that point, otherwise I'm just going
Well,
to,
we're,
that's the same thing twice, yeah.
okay, then. CAO.
I think that is it for me.
And if that is it for you, it is it for us, and we are good to go. And thank you.
Councillor Cunliffe is not here. Are we deleting her Hudson Community Forum report then?
Yes, and I tell you what we should do, if the recorder could do this. Let's shift that to unfinished business for next meeting. Nicole, are you good with that? Make that? Thank you. So she doesn't scoot away on that. I did speak with her today, and she's in good spirits, not health, but prefers not to be here in a somewhat relaxed state. There we go. All right, good to go. Public participation. Motion to accept the agenda as amended. Thank you. Second, good. All in favor? Perfect. Good. Done. Public participation, this would be the time to be quiet. Thank you. Good.
We're gonna ask about our sign that we moved on.
Yeah, we're coming up fast on this.
Okay.
Okay, review and approval of the prior minutes, and can I have a motion to accept the minutes, and then we'll go to changing. Thank you, Councillor Bain. Second, thank you, Barmier. And any changes, of which I would say on the first page, which is 5 of 14, if we could move up Councillor Cunliffe to attending, and absent was Councillor Barmier. And other than that, I have no other changes.
Minor ones, it was just a bit of a typo at the second sentence of page 6 of 114, with no one word with a capital in there, just minor thing. But on page 9 of 114, the section 5, third bullet from the bottom of section 5, community gardens are most suitable site for temporary wastewater plant, and perhaps fees can be waived in 2020. Did we not suggest we will waive the fees?
Yeah, that's what I believe.
Yeah, it's not a perhaps, it's we.
But we did waive them.
I believe so.
Oh, we're plowing the garden, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so the word perhaps should just be removed?
Okay, done.
Peter, is that what you recall?
Yeah, just seeing if it was anywhere else. Right, no, I think we just raised it in terms of, this was, I don't remember there being a motion and it was moved and seconded and carried.
There might not have been.
I think we just talked about doing that, and everybody seemed to agree it was a good idea.
Is this an
I don't think we
operational
actually did that. No, only council can waive
Okay,
fees.
Okay. Should we do that now? You want to waive now?
Could do that, if you
Let's do
like.
that, okay, we'll come back to that in a second then. All right, so per Councillor Abbott, we can strike the perhaps, and then I'll do a motion in a second. All in favor of the amended, sorry,
Sorry, I didn't catch what,
perhaps I had too much chocolate before I got here.
sorry, I didn't catch what you said, Councillor Abbott, regarding something on page 6.
It's just the second bullet, it's just a typo in the way that traffic will deal with, and there's a capital N within in one word, previous issues.
Sorry.
This is just a grammar.
Right here.
It's just a
Oh.
grammar. Don't worry about it. Not substantive.
Oh, it should have been a new bullet. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, motion to accept as amended. Thank you. Second, all in favor? Good. We'll go right to I'll make the first motion then, that the community garden fees for 2020 are waived. I'll put that forward. Second, any discussion? Councillor Abbott or Barmier, was that no discussion? All in favor? Yes, approved. Done. Back to business arising from the minutes, and I think we've got pretty robust unfinished business, unless you disagree. Councillor Abbott? Take that as a no. Good. We're on to unfinished business. Batters up. CAO?
I have not completed that task yet.
Thank you. I will, I'm reminded to talk about that when I talk about the RCMP. Thank you. Okay, good. Public Works Manager?
There are no residents in Lions Bay that meet this criteria. The creation of, it's a complicated process to waive the garbage fees. There's procedures that are required from the waste control collections people, inspection requirements. It's not a straightforward process. So there's negotiation with the haulers. Containers need to be provided. It's more complicated than simply waiving the fees. So I would suggest that we put this on hold until it becomes an issue.
Are we aware of any residents at this time?
No, we've checked with Vancouver Coastal Health. Nobody in the village meets the criteria.
All right, well, I would be fine with a strike. As done, thank you.
Okay.
Strike, Nicole. For the next two, Councillor Cunliffe will take her shame for not being here. And we're back to number 115 for Mr. Strigley and Mr. Nemo, CAO.
So,
My apologies. I haven't had a chance to sit down with Peter to discuss
we've done some, or
preliminary research.
Mr. Jaffer's done some preliminary research, but we haven't completed that process or spoken with the fire chief, which I think was also on our list. And so we haven't completed that process, unfortunately. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can we say that for the next council meeting, this would be a done deal?
I would definitely expect so, yes.
So, heard yes, good. Gentlemen, sorry.
Are we
And
gonna be consulted, or anybody, talk to anybody in the street, or just gonna talk to the chief and that's it?
No, I would expect that we would talk to the chief and come back and give you a call and say, okay, let's get together and, or this is what we, you know, these are the things that, these are the considerations that we have to keep in mind. And maybe we can sit down and go over stuff and maybe we can do that in person.
It'd be nice to be consulted,
Yeah.
okay?
can we then, so we're 2 weeks away, we're the first meeting of the month.
There's the third, is it? Third Tuesday.
Oh, the week's running quickly here.
Do we have your contact information?
I think we gave it to the last time.
We got it last time. You guys are both in the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw you
Yeah.
both in the book today.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have it.
All right, gentlemen.
Okay.
And
Yep.
one quick question, the new tower going in for cellular service, are all carriers gonna be allowed on that tower?
They'll all, and be invited.
Well,
But,
yeah, I just want to
Yeah,
ask.
they may
because
not all,
I'm quite
choose
sure they're all
to-
gonna use it because there are people in the village using different carriers. but
Exactly.
Some people are having trouble with reception and stuff, and I
Yeah.
just wonder if they're all being advised that the tower's going in and
they're all being solicited, yes,
get your
and
buddy gear and get in there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
The more the merrier for us on the revenue side, so I'm sure everybody's going to get a piece of the cake if they want it. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you. All right, thank you, CAO and Public Works Manager. And we'll leave that for Councillor Cunliffe and her carryover. Thank you, Nicole. Which brings us to staff reports and the CAO's shifting of the agenda here, okay?
right, so I'll do the verbal regarding the Lady Death survey of residents first. So we sent out survey questions to all 37 people who were polled about the filming. And asking questions about the polling process itself, you know, whether the, for example, whether the pollsters were respectable and courteous and so forth, and whether the information provided was good or complete and accurate and so forth. We asked questions about the filming process itself and whether they were impacted during that process. And we asked questions about the setup and the takedown afterwards. We received 4 responses to the mail-out. 2 of the people lived on Periwinkle, 1 on Sweetwater and 1 on Tidewater. All said that they had no issues. The information was good. The people were polite. It seemed unobtrusive, and they had no complaints or issues with the process or the execution of it. So yeah, I just wanted to pass that along. I don't think we're going to get any more responses at this point. And they were mailed to each of those residential addresses. And that's it for that one. So back to item number 1, commercial building policy.
Well,
Unless there's anything from council or questions or anything regarding the last item.
thank you on that, and I think that's for the film thing. My editorial is that's a pretty good response. Good, thank you.
Okay, with respect to the commercial filming policy, I didn't realize when I brought the policy the first time, that wasn't clued into the fact that production companies generally start their days at 7 in the morning or earlier, and they squeeze as much as they can into a day, so they go as late as they can on a regular basis. Their normal work days are, they generally, as you can see from the attachments to my report, they're filming till 9 or 10 o'clock all the time. So, which is, I think, why the daytime filming hours were set out to begin with as till 10 p.m. It's always been, those hours have always been what we've worked with under the old policy as a matter of procedure. And so I didn't clue into the effect that changing it would have, but changing it would have a severe effect. I think that we would find that most applications would fall into having to require an amendment to or dispensation for filming hours, and we'd be coming to council every single filming application, which wasn't the intent of the model as it was brought and set up and reviewed and considered by council. So there's that, and the recommendation that we put it back to 10 p.m. And that's all I'm going to say on that for now. In terms of the input or feedback that we got from residents in respect of the filming policy, we really only got 2 items for council's consideration. One was from Mrs. Zorgan, and that's set out or attached to the report. And in it, she's seeking something that I think we're not in a position to do, and that is to negotiate on behalf of residents in respect of compensation or accommodation that a resident may wish to obtain if they don't agree with the filming or don't want to be present for it. I'm unaware of any situations where somebody has asked to be accommodated because they don't want to be around and has not been. So I don't think it happens. And Haley Cook, who is our filming liaison, was unaware of it ever happening or hearing of that kind of thing happening in respect of conversations that she's had with other people in other municipalities who deal with films and those kinds of things. So I don't think it's an issue. I think that if it ever became an issue, then we would have to come back to council and say, look, this has become an issue. Or, if there's instances of it happening, then I think we would have to address it. But I think that, the process as it stands in the industry and in all communities that host the industry in their communities, it's a one-on-one between the filming people and the residents, and I think it would be impossible for us to insert ourselves into that role at this point in time. I think trying to do anything proactively is A, unnecessary, and B, would require a lot of care and consideration and consultation that I'm not sure is really required. So if it became an issue, like I say, I think we would have to come back and see what we could do, but I don't think it is an issue, and I don't think it will become an issue. Mr. Tsang's comments reflected his suggestion that perhaps it should be 20% for the threshold for approval or rejection, and that and that student films should have to abide by the rules, which they do. They just get their fees waived. And the reasons for the 15% threshold really came from the survey responses, but most of which suggested a much higher threshold. But I think that given the potential impacts on residents, that we should take a more cautious approach, and that's why the 15% threshold was recommended, and council seemed to agree with that. So that's more or less what we've got before you. The track change in respect to the hours is shown in the policy, and I don't think there were any other changes, other than there might have been a correction or something in one of the draft letters, but they don't form part of the policy in any event. Any questions?
Good, thank you very much. Anything more? If not,
Nope.
thank you. Just to expedite this, I'll put forward the motion and ask for a second. We'll go to discussion, and on that discussion, I'd like to mention up front that I think we have beat this horse to the ground. And if we look at our public input off survey requests, it's normal, so let's do it right, but do it quickly. I'll put forward the motion as requested by the CAO. Have a seconder? Thank you. Any discussion? I'm happy to start. Thank you. One minor change. It must be because I was sitting next to former Mayor Burr. I have a small change in moving of a comma from here to there, so that it reads nicer. There you go. And that's, so it'll now read, daytime filming hours mean 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Thursday, Monday to Saturday, comma. There you go. Cool. Thank you. It's yours. And I think in the information piece, I would make comment that Mr. Singh is a non-absent property owner. There we go. I have no further comment. Councillor Abbott.
Yep, a couple of things. I'm not in agreement with the moving it to 7 p.m. I understand that means most or many will come to council. I think I made it clear last time that I thought that should be the case anyway, so that's supporting my issue, so I still believe that. I think once you go past 7 p.m, there's a significant disruption to people's lifestyle and livelihood, and it's no different to any other noise bylaw after 7. I don't see why it should be treated differently.
About we, if I may, does anybody else, so we can get fresh to this piece, if you have more, Councillor Abbott, is there anybody strongly in favor? I put forward as it is with the 10, Councillor Abbott's put forward the 7. I'd like to see the other two councillors state their view. Yep.
Well, I share the concern about going back to 7 as well, but I just put myself in the situation where I want to be listening to all that racket at that time, and I would say definitely not. However, I guess where I've come to my compromise on this thing is give it a try at 7, come back and review it in a year. If there's been problems, then we change it. But give it a try. I don't know, and then just so the filming industry is on notice that we're watching, and don't disturb the neighbors if you can. Because I think it is a big issue. And I would rather take care of the residents than the filming community, because I think that's our responsibility. If they don't want to film here, well, sorry, but we've got to protect our residents.
Okay, Councillor Bromham.
Well, I mean, I look at what all the other communities are doing, and I just don't understand why we wouldn't want to be in line with that. Similar time frame. So 7 to 10, 7 to 11. It seems to be a pretty standard from all of these municipalities. So maybe they've already been through this. I don't know if we need to reinvent the wheel on it. So I'd be okay with the extended hours.
I've already put it forward. I'm on the extended hours. I don't like leaving this as 2-2, so I'm going to give it a bit more. If you have more stuff, Councillor Abbott, we'll go to it, but let's thrash this one out.
No, I was going to just comment on that. I mean, I think all the other municipalities, but we do have noise bylaws and other things that other municipalities don't have. We try to find a fit for our municipality, for our villages. And it's not always the same that happens in other bigger, more established municipalities.
CAO?
I was going to point out that some of these hours from some of these municipalities are not specific to filming. Some of them are, that's what time their quiet time is. It doesn't start until 9 or 10. Like, for example, Belcarra is the earliest at 9 p.m. That's when their noise bylaw says time to quiet down.
Ours is much earlier. That's my point. Ours is much earlier.
And the other thing I was going to say was our noise bylaw is something that's been on the work plan in terms of bringing back amendments or rewriting the whole thing, because A, it's not really enforceable without noise equipment that we don't have the way it's written, and B, we hear pushback all the time in terms of the content of that noise bylaw in respect of people's opinions on reasonableness of it. So it has been on the docket for some time to bring it back for reconsideration. Staff haven't gotten around to that for a number of reasons. The other thing I was going to say or suggest was that rather than doing a trial of it at 7 p.m., the aspect of keeping it at 7 p.m. is that, and that I'd like to point out, was part of the way in which this was designed, was so that the parameters that have to be met are clear. They know what they have to do. If it's multi-day filming, they have to poll. But if it's not more than 5 days, then yes, they have to poll. Yes, they have to have no more than 15% in opposition. But other than that, there's really no reason for them to have to come to council. And what that means is that there's no reason for us to have to prepare all the materials, bring it, put it in a report, set it down on the agenda, and bring it back to council, just so you can say it meets the requirements of our policy.
So it's not just that we can say it, it's that trigger gives residents the opportunity to have, the process is going to be slightly slowed, they know it's coming to council, to come to council and say, I don't like it, you know, close to my house I have young kids, I don't like the noise. It gives that opportunity.
They can say that. They can say that when they're polled. They can oppose it when they're polled, and if more than 15% are opposed, then it won't go. Plain as that.
Didn't you say the shorter duration ones don't require
They
poll?
if it's over 3 days, but less than 6 days, then they still. If it's over 3 days, they have to be polled.
Right.
So then they're going to be polled, and if they meet all the criteria, and even if it's less than, if it's 3 days or less, they're still, all the residents are still going to get notified, and they're still going to have an opportunity to provide their feedback to us before any permit is granted. So there are checks and balances. It's just, I'm concerned that we're going to be bringing every single application to council, and I really wanted to, you know, see if we could try and get away from that by having clear parameters that people follow, and if they meet the parameters, they're going to get their permit, subject to something unforeseen. But otherwise, it's only the real major ones, or the outliers, or the repeat shows, or whatever, that, or the nighttime filming beyond what's a normal day for these guys, where they've got to come to council, and it's a much more involved process. I wanted to see if we could streamline that, and I thought that we had achieved that, but I see this as a real glitch in that process, and I'm concerned that we haven't achieved anything. We're coming to council on every application.
I share that view, but part of it is the streamlining, and I think on to Councillor Abbott's piece about, you know, the residents have the opportunity to take the get out of Dodge card and be relocated if it's a lengthier piece. So and the threshold as well, so that's where I'm going with the 10 o'clock.
But if I
So it
could
sounds
say one
like
other
if
thing.
we're moving to 7, we're essentially floating on that duck. This is a dumb policy. It doesn't save you any work, it doesn't save staff any work, doesn't streamline anything. It goes against what the industry standard is, you might as well not have it if it goes against what typical industry.
Oh, I think there's a lot more in here than just that one thing. It doesn't sink the entire effort.
Sounds
Well,
like
I'm not saying throw the policy out or it's of no use whatsoever. I'm just saying that the streamlining aspect of things is going to get frustrated. You know, there is the option of, you know, maybe we can do 9 o'clock so that, you know, if they have to stop filming at 9, maybe that helps. I don't know. But I think 7 is going to be a real problem. You know, you could have a one-day film shoot and they're going to go till 8. They got to come to council.
All right, thank you very much. So gentlemen, we'll go in a couple of minutes here. I'm of two minds. We can go for the whole ball of wax, or I can suspend this and we'll wait till Councillor Cunliffe's here the next time out. I mean, I don't think we got a lot of film applications the next 2 weeks. Or we can come to a different number. Councillor Bain, Councillor Abbott.
Well, you know, we don't sit here because of the geography in the village we live in, but we've got to acknowledge the fact that Councillor Cunliffe's the only one that lives in the neighbourhood. That 95% of
It's
she might have a better
unfortunate, the
insight
spike of
than-
knowledge is not here, so I'll give you that
She
one.
might have
So-
a better insight than
Yeah, so it's either we for 2 weeks is nothing to me, so I'm happy to just park it if there's no other points other than the time. Councillor Abbott?
Yeah, the other one was more, I think, well, more comment. I mean, the 15%, I think we absolutely should stick with that. You know, don't be a genius to do the math. If it's less than, as Mrs. Williams suggested, that it's only the immediate people, as in those that live in the street, and you can include everyone else, and you take it down to 10%, we're back to one person gets to decide. So I think that's another reason why not to change either of those two. She did ask for 2 changes, and we only mentioned one. Right? She did ask that it's only her street that is impacted, considered impacted, and I think that's also not practical, so we don't change that. Mr. Tsang's email speaks about reimbursed. I think my original read of that was he was referring to given the opportunity to stay in the hotel. But reimbursed can mean something else. So I don't know. Was the beginning idea that he was asking for more? Was he suggesting cash payouts? Was he needing more? Anything else, or was it just the use of the word reimbursed? Do you have any insight on that? He says local residents should also be reimbursed for their inconvenience.
Yeah, I think he's referring to being accommodated.
I thought that, but it's, you know, it's not necessarily what it says. But
And sometimes they, you know, if there's other things, you know, if you're a home-based business or something, I know that some people might have bargained for compensation for other aspects besides accommodation. So.
And I agree, we can be negotiating what hotel and where that's.
All right then, then I think what I'm going to do then is that we're pretty much narrowed down to the time slot here, either 7 or 10 or in between. I'm going to presume there's no movement unless somebody shoots their hand up. So I think what we'll do is we'll hold this till the next meeting, and everybody can lobby Councillor Cunliffe in the meantime.
So what we need to do is,
So we're in discussion and we need to...
yeah, but we've got a motion and a second on the floor, so
I don't want to vote on it because that
You can-
slows it down.
you could, with the consent of everybody else, propose that your motion be withdrawn, and move a motion in its stead that the matter be brought back to the next council meeting.
So stated, all in favor? Yes, unanimous, thank you. And Nicole, you've got that, thank you, CAO, and good. All right, and back to the CAO on item number 8A2.
Okay, so what we have is a renewal of the fire dispatch contract that we have with the City of Surrey. And that has been, elements of this have been reviewed with our insurers. Wanted to make sure that we were covered off under the indemnification clause. And that's now been dealt with. And the substance of the contract is it's similar yet different from what we previously had. The services haven't changed. The ones that we're getting are still costing ballpark around the same amount. And they've inserted, however, a table that shows, you know, if our call volumes go up substantially in accordance with those numbers in the table, then our costs will likewise go up. As you can see from the report, there's a graph showing, there's a table showing our call volumes actually trending downward. And looking like 2019 is going to be similar to 2018. And so at this point in time, those numbers in the table in the contract do not or should not affect us. And we should be at the lowest tier for annual call volumes up to 121 in 2020, for example, 4806. As noted in the report, there's a couple of pieces of equipment that we do pay for on top of this. In terms of our FDM records management, we pay a $600 a year for software maintenance licensing on 2 mobile data terminals, and we have a router that supports rip and run reports that is going to need to be replaced at some point in the next couple of years, and that'll be an extra $1,000 that we'll have to budget for. But other than that, it all looks good, and the recommendation is to approve it.
Councillor Bain, do you have a motion?
Yeah, I would go for approving it. Yeah.
Okay.
As your recommendation.
Seconder? Discussion? Councillor Abbott?
2 things, just as a matter of education for myself. So if I phone 911 and goes to Ecom, they would then dispatch, Surrey would then get the call and dispatch from there. Is that how it works?
Yeah, it goes to Ecom, then it bounces over to Surrey.
So they do the dispatch.
For the 3 North Shore departments and Lions Bay.
And then our Lions Bay Alert thing goes to EPACT, who also offer similar services, but that's another agreement.
No, it's not the same services at all.
Don't they do this as well?
No, EPACT is simply a notification system that is based out of Squamish.
So it's Ecom that does offer to do
Yeah,
the whole
Ecom also does fire dispatch for some municipalities,
But it's more
Vancouver and Burnaby and several
it's more
others.
expensive.
They are.
Okay. On this schedule, Schedule A, fuel amount shown below will be estimated 3% inflation increase. Can we accept that and then blow the table away at the bottom? Because the table at the bottom has a 6% increase. I prefer the 3. The table at the bottom, year on year, goes up by 6%, but the written word in statement number 3, the last sentence, says it's estimated on 3. The math doesn't work, but I like the 3.
Yeah, I confess I did not check the math in the table. So you're saying from 4806 to 5099 is...
Some of them are 5.9%, some are 6.01, that's 6%. I checked a few. I didn't check every single one, but I checked 2 or 3 and realized the trading was wrong. But I think we should just blow the table away and take the 3.
Well, the table means nothing, it's the fee.
Exactly.
What about the increases for each threshold of call volume? Did you go that way as well?
I didn't check those. I didn't actually know. They should just be prorated. I didn't check them that way. I only checked the other way. So yeah, we should check the whole table.
Because, yeah, I mean, we'd have to just insert something after the 3% in paragraph 3 that says, that addresses the whatever percent increase in accordance with the thresholds but just take the dollar volumes out, the dollar values out. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they would come back to me and say, well, actually, the 3 in the paragraph 3 is the wrong number. It should be 6.
I'm sure they are, but we should certainly ask the question. and
How,
clarify.
how would you modify this CAO?
I guess what
I mean,
What
the
we
number
could
plus
do-
3.
what we could do is amend the resolution.
Actually,
You
sorry,
could-
could I jump in? I think
Yeah.
actually what they're saying is, after its annual review, the dispatch service fee, it's based on 3% increase on variable dispatch costs, but the actual labor cost increase. So I don't think they're actually saying it's 3%. It's a 3% inflation increases for variable dispatch costs, but also adjusted based on the actual labor costs for that year. And they probably have a long-term agreement, so they probably got their labor costs in there, plus their other costs are increased by 3%. Because I agree with you, I mean, it might be worth asking, but the table is going to stand. I mean, this is what they're saying their costs are, because they've gone
Right.
through this and they've done a 5-year plan like we do.
Right,
So they're
yeah.
saying it's based on actual labor costs
Right.
plus inflation increases of 3% on their variable dispatch costs.
Right.
I think
Wouldn't
that's what
the
they
labor
meant.
costs include the 3%?
That's the way I read it.
Yeah, no, I'm reading it, that would be
No,
adjusted based on the
typically not.
actual labor costs for the year. They probably have a long-term agreement, so they know what those costs are, and an additional inflation increase on the variable dispatch costs, and they're saying that's 3%.
Right, okay.
Although it would have been
There's
that,
an and in there.
yeah, that's how I'm reading it, based on, because they would know their actual labor cost depending on when their labor agreement expired. Could be a long-term labor agreement. And then 3% on the other costs.
Right. Okay.
And whether it's 3 or 6, we're going for it.
Yeah,
We-
I suspect they're not gonna suddenly change their table
No.
of costs.
Well, I tell you what, the motion leaves some leeway for you to fine tune the documentation, in my view.
Well, why don't we approve the contract and then, but in terms of number 2, the resolution number 2, put a comma and say, subject to the CAO inquiring as to clarification of the incremental cost increases.
Or the annual cost increase.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have that, Nicole?
Not exactly. I executed a comma, subject to the CEO inquiring what the increases in, and then I lost you.
Would you not have the freedom to negotiate a little bit with the word substantially there? It's not exactly as written here, but substantially, like you're in the ballpark, so just
Yeah,
fine tune.
yeah, you're right. Actually, that's part of the reason why that's there as a standard wording. So how about we don't need to do anything? We just
That's a fine tuning of the document, very simple.
pass it, and
Okay.
I will do what I can to explore whether or not that we're able to push them on that a little bit.
Good, all right, we'll leave that with you. Any further discussion, Councillor Abbott? And what kind of person takes out their calculator and does that kind of calculation?
Person that looks at numbers all day, you see it.
Gets so bored that you just thought you'd take
I just
it.
see, I don't calculate. That doesn't look 3.
Don't tell me it didn't look right.
It does. I'll tell you, if you look at spreadsheets all day,
All right.
they pop out at you. That one doesn't look right.
All right, I'm calling the motion, all in favor? Done, thank you.
Unless it's Mr.
All right, CFO, out of the bullpen, let's go, batter's up. Right, Tony? Okay.
Yes, so this report is continuation of September 17th meeting when we talked about that we anticipate and we will have some surplus in the Harvey Tank project, and that we've approached the ministry and we've been allowed to change the scope, adding in some PRVs, and we had talked about funding those from reserves. But on further consideration, staff were recommending using our borrowing bylaw to actually borrow for those 2 PRVs. And then there's an additional piece that I guess if there's any questions, Public Works Manager can answer about, we're actually wondering about adding in a 3rd PRV as well, and potentially either borrowing for that or drawing from reserves. So I wasn't sure how much, if you wanted me to completely go through the report. I'm assuming you've read it and just really answer questions. And I have some on-table items to hand out as well. There was a request for a reserve schedule, which was a good idea, as well as just take one and pass it on. And then the mayor also asked me to show you the breakdown of our liability servicing limit, so I can review that as well.
Thank you, CFO. And so the ask of staff is to have for us to give them direction. Keeping in mind that what is at this point the public portion, and there is some discussion later on with some numbers. So let's stay away from those numbers for now. And so did you want to go through this a bit more?
Well, I don't know if you wanted me to go through the on-table items first, sort of a summary of reserves.
Let's do that, please.
Okay. So basically, the reserves fall from the financial statements, the audited financial statements at the end of the year. It's guided more by the financial statements than it is the budget. So I've started with our the December 31st, 2018 balance. And I can go over later what the different types of reserves are. And then there's some large activities that happened in 2019. The main is the sale of 52 Brunswick. So that 52 Brunswick, we had a gain of 1.8 million, and per our land reserve bylaw, that money has to go into the land reserve fund. But prior to selling that property, we sold 63 Brunswick, and the intention was the revenue or the gain from 52 Brunswick would fund the purchase of 63 Brunswick. It's just we purchased 63 Brunswick before we sold, so essentially we funded that through surplus. So all of the gain goes into the land reserve fund, but then 757,000 is transferred back out to surplus to reimburse the money that was used to buy 63 Brunswick. And then under the infrastructure fund, that's a new reserve. It's basically the 10% infrastructure levy that we charged this year, so that money goes into that reserve, which is at the Curly Stewart Fund, which has been around for a long time. And then the gas tax funding, we're required to show that separately. That is gas tax funding that we get every year from the government. We generally get about $55,000 a year. But if you recall, in 2019, they doubled that. So we're getting $118,000. So at the end of the year, we'll have about $410,000 gas tax funding. So in terms of the uses, all of these reserves can be used for capital, with the exception of the Curly Stewart, obviously, is for the award. And the Land Reserve Fund, because that money is from the sale of waterfront property, it can only be used to acquire property that provides public access to the same body of water with at least equal benefit to the public. And that was why we were able to use the funds to purchase 63 Brunswick. And we can also use those funds to loan to ourselves. The other item we have, it's called unrestricted surplus. So it's money that we have access to, but it can be used for operating as well as capital. And the balance at the end of the year was $1,588,000, and that will increase by the $757,000, the reimbursement for the purchase of 63 Brunswick. So I'm estimating at the end of the year we'll have about $2.2 million in reserves, and then we'll have about $2.3 million in surplus. So that can just sort of help when we're talking about uses of the money. The next one, it's the liability servicing limit. So when we borrow, this is one of the requirements. We have to fill this out. It's one of the steps for the borrowing. This is actually calculated by, every year I have to do LGDE reporting. I have to take the financial statements and then report them to the ministry. And this is a calculated number, but it's essentially our municipal revenues, but it's only the municipal revenues that we can count on every year. So it's like our property tax, our utility fees. It's all basically all of our revenue except grants, because grants come and go. We can't rely on those, with the exception of the small community grant. That's an unconditional grant we get every year. And it also doesn't include things like land sales. So it's sort of the exceptional items. And then 25% of that becomes our limit. And then a separate analysis, we look at what our actual debt servicing costs are. So that's our existing debt. It's the annual principal and interest we pay on our debt. And I took this as of 2018, but of course we had new debt in January of this year for the trucks, the public work trucks. So our total debt servicing cost is $317,000. And then we're also required to, as soon as you do a loan authorization bylaw, we now have the permission essentially to borrow up to $3 million. Even though we haven't borrowed that, we're required to estimate the cost of what that borrowing is and include it in our limit as well. So basically at the end of the day, our total liability servicing cost is $546,000. So we have a capacity available of $261,000. So thinking it up percents, our existing debt, we're at 39%, but the additional unissued debt, which is the $3 million less the $460,000 of borrowing we've already done, brings our overall debt capacity to 67%. But what it means is, in the next few years, if we hopefully borrow up to that $3 million, that 67% doesn't change because it's already accounted for in that number. I think the reason they do that is so you don't do a variety of loan authorization bylaws that in total, if you drew on all of them, would take you over 100%. Once they give you permission to borrow the $3 million, you have to take into account the cost of what that debt will be, even if at the present time you haven't used it. Okay, is that enough, Norm?
Good work. Okay.
So at the end of the day, we're at 67% of our limit. So maybe a little more detail than you needed, but.
Did you follow? I mean,
Be listening to
All right.
years, I understand.
All right, let me guide
Tell you
you.
the rounding areas and your percentages?
All right, let me guide
I
everybody.
still don't know how much we can borrow.
So
Well, it's right here.
it is, to be fair, that is a little confusing, because normally when you go to get a mortgage, you're told you can get a mortgage up to $300,000. They don't look at that at the MFA. They tell you how much you can spend to repay the borrowing. So currently we're spending $317,000 a year to service our debt, and we're allowed to spend up to $808,000 to service our debt. You're right, it is a little different way of looking at it. Instead of saying you're allowed to borrow up to $10 million, they're saying your mortgage payments and all your payments during the year can be this much. Yeah. Which is kind of what you do when you get a loan. You calculate how much it costs, look at how much you make, and see if you have enough money to pay back that debt.
Right,
That makes
thank
more
you very
sense.
much. We'll come back to you on the discussion piece if there's any further questions. So moving this along, I'll ask for a seconder. I think most would know where I stand in terms of spending on infrastructure. I like the way staff has laid this out, and there's also a reason they've articulated why there is a reason to borrow versus using our own cash. I'm going to put forward a motion. I'll ask for a second. We'll go to discussion. We'll see where it goes. And so the motion is to fund both of the Bayview Road PRV and Mountain Drive PRV through the balance of the CWWF grant and MFA borrowing, and add funding of the third PRV adjacent to the school via MFA borrowing, subject to positive public feedback. Seconder, thank you. Discussion, I have nothing more to add other than the CFO has. I originally thought, why don't we use our cash, but the cash is a rainy day fund, and the borrowing, if we have to go through MFA, takes a long period sometimes. So I kind of see that. This is not a juggernaut amount by any means, so I'm comfortable with that. I like since we have tax, and I presume we will tax again for infrastructure, that we are actually spending money on infrastructure. And I think for the three pieces, that for me is, there's economy of scale here to do it all at once, and that's all of my commentary. Yes, Councillor Bain.
Yeah, I'm fully in support of the PRVs and all that. In particular, the third one that we hadn't really been considering that much up until now, the one at the school. I've always been concerned about the split there, where we've got higher pressure one side than the other. And I think we've been suffering along with inadequate fire flow capacity, so I think it is a priority to get on with it. I'm not exactly sure the best way to fund it, so I don't want to take a hard stand on it. I'd like some assurance that it's going to be done with the least impact as possible. We haven't been talking about dollars for the projects, which I realize we shouldn't be talking in a public rate yet. But how would I put this?
Should tread carefully.
Yes, I am very light in the anyhow. What you would, I should turn to you. What you would, your ballpark figure in the dollars for this is doable with what we can fund through whatever means we are looking at and discussing today? Is that too broad?
I think we should defer to the
Carefully.
closed
Okay.
for a more robust decision. To put your mind at ease, we'll talk about the full dollar values there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That was on the edge.
My toes burned.
Well, you got warned before the pencil tapping. Councillor Abbott?
Yes, my first gut feel was absolutely fiscal conservatism. Why borrow if you've got the money? Why pay more back, more debt? Regardless, and I know it's an extremely good low rate and no one else in the world can get that good and all of that stuff, but it still is interest you're paying back, and if you don't need to, why are you doing it? I'm still kind of there when I look at the numbers, and I get it, you know, our reserves add up to $5 million, and it's a rainy day fund, and the number about to talk in closed, there's fractions of that. I don't know, I still, my feeling is we should be using the money we have in the bank and the reserves rather than going into the loan. The loan is still available. We clearly got plenty space in our loan cap if we decided to go back. I know it's another step that, you know, you can do that twice a year, can't you? Or how often can you do that?
It's, there's 2 offerings a year.
2 offerings a year?
Yeah.
So I don't feel the pressure that we are really pressed to keep that money, the reserve money available, given the numbers we're looking at. I still feel we should keep that.
Could I add a few things then? I'm sure I meant to say that when I was talking the report. First of all, the 67%, you would never go to 100%
No.
because you'd always want to have capacity. So we're probably, I wouldn't personally be much comfortable going more than 60%. I mean, we do have the $3 million, and then over the next 10 years, some of the debt is going to be repaid. But one of the reasons I look when I look at these reserves, I don't think it's so much of a rainy day fund as we've already had our asset management plan, which showed we have a huge deficit. We know we have projects that are coming, roads that have to be done. This really is probably only enough money to even do one road like Bayview. And what we're finding with the grants is they're coming a lot slower than we anticipated. The third phase of the ICIP has just come out, and it's due in February, and it's for water projects. And our hope would be to apply and try to do the Bayview project with that. But the feedback we're getting is, first of all, there's only $150 million available in total for all of the province. But it's open to everyone, including communities that don't have drinking water. They're actually required to apply for the grants as well. So it's going to be very competitive. And I don't have a lot of confidence we're going to be successful with that grant. So it's something we'll probably be talking about in the strategic plan as well, is we're in a position where we have to start looking at our infrastructure master plan, and we're going to have to pay for those in full. We can't assume we're going to get grants for them, all of them. So when I look at this number, I actually don't think it is very robust. We have $3 million. We've already gone to the public. They've approved the expenditure. We have a list of things we can spend. And there's going to be projects that are very high ticket items that we can't get a grant for. And there's also quite a few things that we can't borrow for. I mean, technically you really can't borrow for roads anymore, but because we're doing the water underneath and we redo the roads, any type of large fire apparatus, like a fire truck, we really can't get a, sorry, I said borrow, I meant to say grant. There aren't grants really available for fire trucks anymore. Even buildings, if something had to be done, major renovations to the Clot building, we couldn't get a grant for that. So I know $5 million looks like a lot, but I'm actually thinking that needs to be saved for projects that we will have to fund ourselves through reserves and possibly through borrowing as well. So because we have this $3 million on a 5-year loan authorization bylaw, that was actually why when we talked about it, we really felt it would be much more prudent to borrow for that money. Borrow for something we've already got approval to borrow for, because even just the process of going for borrowing, if we had an emergency, it takes 6 months because you do have to go to the public. And we have a history, historically there have been some larger ticket items that weren't capital that we needed ready cash for. The Kelvin Grove, the water plant, the main break was $400,000 and it was operating. So we couldn't, even if we had had time, we wouldn't have been
Pipe
able to
broke,
borrow
spewed
for
over
that.
the road into the house.
So, so that was sort of where staff's mindset was when we thought, you know, this is really the perfect opportunity to borrow. It's already approved. We can do it quickly and try to save this money for the projects we know are coming that I'm concerned we won't be able to get grants for.
Yeah.
I think in my piece, just because we'll nip this really quick because we need to go in camera and talk about this further to come out and make our decision. I'm fine with that too. And maybe that's where we should go. You know, in the 8 years I've been sitting around this table, more or less, I mean, my naivety when I first became a councillor was that in any business, especially one like ours, you know, if we wanted to just debt cap ourselves for a couple $1 million or $500,000 of stuff we'd done, we could just go to any lender and just get the dough. Not so in government world. We need to be specific to the project, and so the timelines are involved in that. So I kind of buy entirely with CFO Rook the piece here that our cash is very valuable for emergencies and things we don't qualify for, and I'd like to keep our powder dry on that. That's my 2 bits worth on that. I think Councillor Abbott raises a decent point. On the other hand, if you got cash earning a whopping 1.5% or 1%, you know, and we're continuing to tax for infrastructure, you know, it's a good counter argument. So I think maybe when we go into close, we can talk about this a bit further and come back. Councillor Barmier, I'm going to guess you're going to go with the flow on this one.
Well, I mean, I have to defer to the professional, and it sounds like that's
Yeah.
your advice, so I think borrowing in this case makes sense.
I don't want anybody
Well, I think the came to mind on the borrowing bylaw, we can only use that for things that have grants, right?
No, actually,
I don't see that in this
Yeah.
document, but the statement.
when we, in terms of MFA and Metro Vancouver, we can use the $3 million for anything that's listed in the loan authorization bylaw, and it doesn't matter to them if we get a grant or not. But when we proposed this, we did the referendum, we had said that we would only use the borrowing if we had a grant. So that's why we're suggesting with the
A
third
minimum,
PRV.
it was a minimum of 50/50.
Yeah.
right?
I think it
Yeah.
was 50/50, but
50/50.
As a minimum.
whether,
Yeah.
that was discussed for sure.
Yeah, I remember that.
So this was, and things have changed with the availability of the grants since then. So that's where we're very clear in this report. If we do decide that the third PRV we'd want to do with our borrowing as well, like in terms of MFA and Metro, there's no issues. But we obviously have an obligation to
Go back
communicate to the
community, 'cause we're not
residents.
doing what we said we would.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Explain to them why.
which is the
and,
public piece,
yeah.
but, I mean, if you take the elected council here, I mean, there's different spikes of knowledge, so to put this kind of complicated issue out to the public beyond, you know, a couple of top bullet points, it's really going to be a tough deal. The public is going to go with council's recommendation, I think. So I think I've got, you know, I don't want anybody to trip on anything here. We can take this in camera and duke it out and come back.
I think we probably need to, so we know, make sure we understand the numbers.
Well,
Yeah, just for the
well, I don't
numbers,
want
that's-
I don't want anybody to trip on things, and I don't want Peter to bang the table later.
But basically, the 2 PRVs that were originally part of the scope were removed and came back. That is considered part of the grant. It's just the third PRV is not considered part of the grant.
So, I mean, the other alternative, I'm not in complete agreement yet, but if everyone else is, if you want to do the resolution now,
Well, I'm fine. I put forward the resolution. It's been seconded. We're discussing it. I mean, everybody's seen the numbers, and the CFO's done the peripheral explanation. I think there's 2 pieces to this. One, either council's in favor of doing the 2 or the 3 PRVs. I'm going to guess we're all in favor of 3. And then it's not about it's about the choosing of the financing. It's either debt or it's cash. So to me, I'm proposing debt, but if I see an overwhelming public response on the other side, this baby's going to come back to us, right? Yes.
And I'm still on the side of cash and reserves, but there's two others. If we're
Well,
in a hard position, we can do it now, or if not, we can come back after the discussion and close, as you suggested.
So you're suggesting we go to vote, and then after,
I'm asking the other two councillors.
I don't mind.
You and I are on two different positions, and the other two are even.
Well, yeah, and
Closed gives us more opportunity to continue to talk about it. Closed gives us more opportunity to continue to talk about it, so I think maybe.
So, am I hearing something?
I'm saying, we're going to closed anyway.
Yeah, we're going to
so-
closed.
Anyway, so.
Okay,
we
so
can
we'll
maybe talk
stop
more
on this
then.
topic and deal with this in closed. Thank you very much. So for the two swing states over here, start thinking ahead.
So,
I'd hate to defer this for Councillor Cunliffe again. Although she did give me her proxy. But she recognized that she wasn't, she recognized that given her current situation, she didn't understand what she was talking about.
so if I could just have a motion to table this until
Motion to
after
table.
the closed.
Second, good, carried. Thank you. CAO, let me just start by saying thank you for your details. Not everybody's seen the back and forth that CAO De Jong has done with TransLink, but I can tell you it is extensive, it is specific, and how he has boiled this down is just wonderful. Thank you.
Basics are that we've got an allocation already approved coming our way of 1,000 service hours. It was part of the previous TransLink budget, and via the feedback that we got from the public during the survey period, and as well additional feedback received by TransLink and their analysis of our service, the recommendation was all around, both from staff and from TransLink, that those hours be allocated to weekday evening service. So that would continue on until evening hours. There is some negotiation, I think, to be had in terms of the actual hours and how they're allocated for the evening service. I think that you know, if we just go till 10 p.m. so that bus is back at Caulfield by 11, then we've got a little bit of extra hours that we can allocate to the deficiency that was identified on Saturday and Sunday morning service. Start a little bit earlier and try and address that as a second thing that we can address instead of just tackling one of the deficiencies that were identified by the public. The phase 3 budget allocation of service hours is coming forward shortly at TransLink, coming up November 2022, and I think Mayor McLaughlin is scheduled to go November 20, is that right? And so we have an opportunity there to also pitch for more hours. You know, the other sort of key deficiency that was identified was the issues that we have with peak service. As you know, the bus goes on only every hour on the 262. Going towards the city, transferring at Horseshoe Bay, if you miss the transfer that you're aiming for, you're only going to wait 20 minutes or so for the next bus to come along. But if you're coming this way back to Lions Bay and you miss the 262, you could be waiting an hour. So trying to identify or identify means by which we can address that that issue. The problem is that you've got to have buses available to throw an extra bus, a second bus into that mix to bring that down from an hour gap to a half-hour gap. And they also require a 4-hour minimum from a labor standpoint. So that makes it an expensive proposition and not one that we can tackle simultaneously with our allocation of phase 2 hours. So when we look at phase 3, we need to be asking for enough hours to, the suggestion is that we ask for enough hours to cover both morning and afternoon. And with a bit of a cushion to address, the additional things here and there that need addressing as well. So that amounts to about another 2,500 hours. The other thing that I noticed, or I was curious about in terms of addressing what seemed to be a very large beef with the service was the transfer issues that we have at Horseshoe Bay. And so I started looking at what would it look like to have an express 262 bus that just basically goes Lions Bay, Horseshoe Bay, Park Royal. And I didn't know whether or not the demand was there to pop into Caulfield on the way there and back. It just adds an extra 5 minutes in each direction. So it's probably necessary given what I discovered about, especially during the school year, is kids using the bus as well. So we couldn't just sort of short circuit Lions Bay and Horseshoe Bay and forget about Caulfield. We'd have to take that into account. But by the time we get to, if we got the allocation for phase 3 of another 2,500 hours, then we're sitting around 8,000 hours, 8,500, somewhere in that range. And for that number of hours, we could theoretically have an express type service. So my thought was that, we pitch for the hours and explore that further. And, in the meantime, we pitch for it based on addressing peak demand. But if we can further explore an alternative model that might service Lions Bay better, then I think we could do that simultaneously.
Sounds like a bait and switch, Peter.
It would be a little bit of a bait and switch, actually. But even if that turned out not to be feasible, I think we still are aimed at, in the right direction in terms of seeking those additional hours. And then the last thing was actually before I get to the grant issues. Does anyone want to just stop and talk about the first items that I've talked about? Questions on that?
Just do briefly. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, just to thank you. And again, as I said, I was at the key meeting, and I've seen the emails that the CAO has done. I can say this: in my 8 years on council, we have never been so granular with TransLink, ever. When I spoke with Mayor Brewer yesterday about this, he never had any treatment like this before. He was debated whether he was ever invited to the workshop to do the bun fight to ask for more service hours. And he certainly didn't have the opportunity to bring the CAO or CFO along. I know for a fact Mayor Broughton certainly was never at the table with this either. So I guess the key point is we are there now, and getting the 1,000 hours is a gift. The CAO, of course, get 1,000, ask for 8,000. I like your thinking. So I'm liking it. The peripheral information is, don't know what we will get at the bun fight, but the TransLink executive have coached us in what we should be asking for if we, as they cut up the pie here. I think the peripheral stuff on this is that the information that the ride-hailing trial in Bowen regrettably went for 2 months in the summer. The results aren't out. In my view, it's not a good target. We would have been a better target. I think the private ride-hailing model is, who knows where that is, but it's going to come out. So this is another piece in this thing. I know of another of my mayor colleagues who have also gone to TransLink and put forward a privatized model wherein they have a shuttle and TransLink pays for it, and it's more effective. So I'm not trying to diffuse the thing, but there's a lot of pieces that still in play here. But the key note is that for the first time in, I think, ever, we are at the plate with TransLink. Any further discussion? Thank you very much.
If I could just sort of piggyback on what you're saying is, I remember going to a TransLink meeting a number of years ago, and they put on a big spread, and councillors would be feeding at the trough again. And it was a big publicity thing where they were telling us how wonderful the service was, and by the way, we need more money. And essentially that's the whole message. Whereas I think with a new CAO or CEO coming in, I forget how many years back that was, I've seen a big change in TransLink. Now they're not just begging for money, they're saying, how can we serve you better? And I think what you're describing is being precipitated by that change in attitude of TransLink. And if they're offering to cooperate with us, I think that's a great opportunity. When I read through this, I thought, is this the same TransLink? This is tremendous. I appreciate what you guys are doing. It's excellent.
Thank you. Again, kudos to Peter for this. He sent a very complicated bunch of issues, and I mean, this isn't like a private sector thing where you respond and they email back. I mean, this is there's time lags, and they think about it, they do their calculations. So this is nothing that's going to go away for us, but it's a meaningful piece for our community that we're going to keep this. I'm going to guess somewhere it's going to be in our strategic piece to keep following, that we don't let this go. But to my key point is that we're at the plate here, and I think we're making progress. Councillor Abbott?
Yeah, it sounds great progress, and obviously we're going so I'm pleased about that. Just one question about the transfer, the connection in Horseshoe Bay. That's one or two bad experiences of that is why I park and ride from Park Royal, and as I said before, I said, well, other lines have reasons to do that. And I'm sure you've heard as well as I have people complaining, coming along the 257 and they see it leave and it's like maybe 2 minutes ahead of them and they can't get there in time. There's been a few complaints about that. Is there any way they can just relax their rules for that one connection and allow the driver to run? Did you have any discussion about let that driver run 5-10 minutes late? Can they not somehow work this?
Yeah, we didn't. We were limited in time at the meeting, and so we weren't able to address that type of issue. But that is, it's called holding the ride before it goes. It holds for the connection, and especially when you're talking about a small service that's only servicing one particular area. For it to leave before the main feeder comes in is crazy. And we had to deal with that when I used to look after the Pemberton Whistler service and connections to the smaller bus that went out to Lone Lot Nation. It was an hour loop that went around. And so, yeah, that bus just had to wait. If the bus coming from Whistler was late because of snow, well, you sit there for 5-10 minutes because it's going to come with 30 passengers that are going to want to ride. And if you take off, they're standing there for an hour or more with nothing to do. Yeah. So yeah, it can be done. And it's a conversation that has to also include West Vancouver Transit, because they operate the Blue Bus that we rely upon for the service. So it's definitely a conversation that I aim to have.
And Councillor Abbott, I can tell you that Mrs. Mayor brings this to my attention at least once a week.
Yeah, that's, yeah, so easy fix that.
Are we good on the operational piece here, and we'll go to the grants?
So with respect to the grant funding, the BIX is the bicycle infrastructure grant that TransLink has set up, and the WIT is the walking infrastructure, walking to transit. So there are different streams of funding within those programs, some of which is the allocation piece. So everybody gets an allocated amount, and then whatever's left over is put into a competitive pool for other projects. And it's so it's two different processes. So our allocation under these two programs is for 2019. Oh no, I guess it's for 2020. Sorry, the cutoff is now $101,000 between the two of them, and through negotiations by Mayor McLaughlin and some of the other smaller mayors, or smaller community mayors. Some
of them are quite small.
The terms were changed such that well, I mean, everybody can accumulate these things now for up to 4 years, but smaller communities are now have a 75-25 split on the grant funding. So it's 75% grant, 25% local government contribution versus the 50-50 that we used to have. So if we don't have a project, then we lose the allocation for the year. My thought was that we have discussed previously having a project that entailed creating a multi-use pathway from the park and ride area, from that terminal or that bus stop by the underpass, right down Lions Bay Avenue down to the beach park. And council had previously asked us to investigate what that might look like from an engineering standpoint and costs. And so we did go out and investigate that. So that's a potential project that we could accumulate year-over-year funding on, and then proceed with it. We think it could probably be done for a couple $100,000. So over a couple of years, that would mean that our contribution would have to be about $50,000. The opportunity in speaking with TransLink was that you know, if we could put forward a sort of a placeholder application, not a full application. We're not committing to anything, but we're identifying a project and asking that they basically hang on to our allocation for the year, notwithstanding that we're not ready to move forward with that project. And so they've agreed to do that. And I've been working with one of the TransLink staff that is responsible for these programs. And so if council is in agreement, then I would complete that process with TransLink. We basically put in the placeholder application for this particular project, which I think I've called what did I name it?
Golden Walkway.
Golden Walkway. The Lions Bay Avenue Connector Trail or something. Yeah.
Connectors.
Well, it does. It connects. You know, it connects people from the bus down to the beach, and also there's a section along the highway that's currently unprotected. I saw somebody walking along there today with headphones on, walking right along the line. You know, we get big trucks that come down and hang a big left onto that on-ramp, and it's an unprotected, unsafe area that needs to be addressed as well. So that was part of this. Anyways, the opportunity is to go ahead and have them reserve our allocation for us while we determine whether or not this is a project that we can make happen. So there's no hard hard and fast commitment from us. We're not tied to this if we decide not to move
Just go
ahead.
back to the expiry, does it expire after 4 years or not? How long can we keep delaying this?
If we don't put this in, then this portion is gone.
Okay, but if we do put this in and allow the money to accumulate, did you say we can do that for up to 4 years?
Yeah, so if you had a project that was, you know, like $1 million project, then you could put a lot towards it.
I think CAO DeJong has said TransLink is doing something special for us. I mean, at the time of our meeting, the application should have been in. Their executive said that they'd accept a letter and some paperwork to show indication of it at least being a place mark. So they're doing their part, and bottom line, at 25 dollars for what would be a pretty cool project, and certainly would connect with our beach in line with our 50th birthday and a whole bunch of other things. And that particular track could use a walkway too. As for the name Connector, I think I sell the naming rights to anybody with $5 grand. Any questions on this? Because otherwise, I think we've done the top part. This is just this is a future, and again, 25 dollars. I'm happy to say there's not a lot of hands going up. Are you good with this, Councillor Abbott?
Yeah, I was commenting on the 25 dollars that those kind of grants scare me. It's still 25 cents, and it needs to be a more important 25 cents than other things before you want to go there. And when you gather it there, and there's an expectation it starts to burn a hole in your pocket, so that scares me. We've still got to find the 25 cents and make sure there isn't something more important to spend it on. I mean, that's we need to keep that in mind. This is where we get.
Well, I don't disagree, but at a top side of 50 grand, I'm liking that. So, all right, I'm going to call a motion on this one. All in favor of the actually, do we start with discussion? We started with discussion.
Yeah.
All right, I'm putting forward the motion. Can I have a second? Any further discussion? Call a motion. All in favor as recommended in the page 3. Done. Unanimous. Thank you. Good. Again, I am close to the fire, and I can't emphasize the CAO dropped everything he was doing to get the letters out and correspond with these people, so that in the 20 minutes we've been talking about it, that's a lot of service and a lot of negotiation. So thank you, Peter. Which brings us back to you again for the SBC tower.
Oh, right.
If I got my numbering right.
SBA.
SBA.
So I just wanted to report out that we have, or that SBA, the cell tower proponent, launched their consultation process on Friday, November 1st. It's projected to end December 6th. That's dependent somewhat on comments received and answers provided to comments or questions that SBA has an obligation to answer to the best of their ability. Sometimes that process ends up dragging out a bit, and Industry Canada has to determine when things are cut off. But projected right now, December 6th. So even from December 6th, if somebody put a comment in then or ask a question at that point, then I think there's a 21-day period by which SBA has to provide satisfactory answer. So then it would end sometime around there. The consultation materials were launched through our village website. The village update, a direct mail drop to each box at the post office. And that was in a sealed envelope that you should have all received a copy of. And the notice on the front of the envelope is actually something that is prescribed by federal regulation. It's a sticker that they have to stick on all of their notice materials when they go out. And there was also regular mail to all non-resident property owners. There was a notice that they placed in the North Shore News and in Peak Magazine. 2 official notice boards of the village office and post office had the notice posted on it, as well as on community notice boards. And there's a public open house at the hall, which is scheduled for November 21st. I just want to say that the process, the consultation process, is the applicant's process. By federal regulation, this is it's always the applicant's consultation process. They have strict obligations that they have to meet in terms of tracking all comments that are received during the consultation period and answering any questions that are posed by the public. I'm going to be amending the text that currently appears on our website to make it a little more clear that public should be sending their questions and comments directly to SBA. Certainly they can CC the municipality, staff, council, what have you, but they have to be received by SBA for them to become part of the official record that is recognized by Industry Canada, or ISED as they're now called. So I want to make sure that that is addressed appropriately. As well, it's been brought to my attention by Councillor Abbott that we really need to provide more and better information in terms of what the project is about, what are the pros and cons. So I intend to put something together that addresses that as well. At present, I've been receiving a couple of things directly from people, so I've had to get in touch with them, get their consent to forward their comments and questions directly to SBA, which 2 out of 3 have gotten back to me and said, sure, no problem. But that's why I want to make sure that the public understands that they need to send their information directly to SBA and copy us, certainly. At the end of the process, then all of the questions, comments, and responses that have been provided throughout the process by SBA will come back to council for consideration. Yeah, that's more or less what I've got. And all I wanted to say about that.
So, I think, thank you very much. So, we've had SBA act substantially as our agent.
No, they're not our agent.
Kind of as our...
They are an applicant
Okay.
They are under the federal process, they are an applicant seeking to build a cell tower. They have a number of steps and requirements that they have to comply with in terms of what ISED requires under their regulations. As between SBA and the Village of Lions Bay, we have a pending agreement, a license agreement, that sets out the terms under which they would proceed with the project. Basically, they've got a year to ground truth everything and make sure that they can comply with everything and that it's all going to work out. After which, all the rest of the provisions kick in.
This is more work for you, though. Were you counting on doing this work at the...
That's what I'm trying to back away from, is the consultation part of it, because it's not our consultation. It's their consultation. We have helped facilitate it, and in fact, we required that they do way more than they would have been required to do under the regulations, which would have been practically nothing because of where the tower is situated. You know, it's like something like 300 meters from a tower, you have to send a mail out to people living within that radius. Well, nobody's going to be living within that radius, I don't think. Possibly you.
Oh, that's okay. I've already lost my hair.
Yeah, I want to try and streamline this and make some things clearer in terms of the information that we have available to the public on our website, and perhaps as well try and direct people to the clarified information through the village update this week.
All right, this week, thank you very much. Councillor Abbott, you want to double down on this? Or are you good with what you got?
No, I think I still want to double down. I still want to double down
Here or later?
here now.
Go for it.
So thanks for further explanation of the process, of the federal application process. I think there's another aspect to this, and that is trying to find what's best for the village, and part of that is an aspect of information gathering, and that's, guess where I was going with, we've proven we can do that really well, far better than results than they're going to get by doing this. We've proven it through the Have Your Say things that we've done several of. So, how many users we got, how many cell phones we got, whether we could help them with some of that information, which would help to make that decision. But that's not going to be part of this process. So
that's not going to help them with their decision making. They've determined that there's a need and that there's a desire expressed by the major carriers to provide service in Lions Bay. So
it's going to help us, I guess, maybe explain to the public, but it's also going to, we still have to ratify this agreement, we still have to agree with this agreement, right?
Subject to simply subject to the comments that are received from the public. Yeah. Otherwise, council has approved it, subject only to those comments. Those comments have to go to the merit of the proposal. They can't just be, I would submit that they can't be going offline. I'm pleased to hear we're going to go back out to the public and try and give them a better, more balanced, more rounded view. I thought the village update went out on Friday left implied or was a little bit, created a bit of an expectation that may not be there. We had someone here tonight saying, all major providers going to be on the cell tower. He went away thinking the answer is yes, but we know they can't, it's not enough space. So we kept, what is major? He said all suppliers, so all providers. We know all 13 providers cannot fit on that tower. So the answer is actually no, not yes. So can I just...
So sorry, let me just see where I was going. So I was going with us gathering more information as well as going out and making sure that the public get a better idea of, as you said, the pros and cons. So much as they don't think that they're all necessarily going to get the additional service. Because we know there's a chance that only Rogers is going to be on that tower. That's what we're told in last week's presentation.
I think who is on the tower is in part going to be a function of how high the tower is. The higher it is, the more people can fit on it. Mm-hmm. At the moment, 2 or 3 out of the major 3 or 4 carriers have expressed interest. Whether at the end of the day they all step up and seek to rent space is to be determined, but there aren't like 12 or 13 different carrier companies. They all piggyback and have piggyback agreements with the major carriers. So yeah, if Shaw gets on, then Mobilicity or whatever it is that they're partnered with is also going to be on, and so there aren't that many. It's really are the major 3 or 4 going to rent space on the tower, and that's the key. And yes, it may be that TELUS says, no, you know what, we're going to hold off. We're going to wait and see. We're not ready for this. And TELUS customers in Lions Bay won't see any improvement in their service. However, if Shaw and Rogers or Bell all get on board, then all those customers will. And that might affect who people choose to have their service with. I don't know. But certainly that information, so that people understand there is limitations to what can be accommodated on the tower. It's going to be partly a function of how big the tower is. And if it turns out that there is more demand than there is space on that tower, then, you know, we would be going and looking at, do we go ahead with the second tower? There was always the expectation to begin with, when this first started 2 years ago, that we would have 2 towers, one at Harvey Creek and one at Magnesia. So it may very well be that we proceed with the second tower if the need is there. It may be that coverage is not as good from Harvey for some areas of the village as it would be from Magnesia. So there may be sufficient demand to have a second tower in any event. But we're not going to know that for some time. But certainly, yes, there's additional information that the public needs to be aware of. In terms of how that information is presented, I would follow basically, to begin with, the information that was provided in my report on October 1st that came to council. A lot of the benefits of having this go forward were in that report. There are a number of additional ones that I've made a note of, as well as a few, you know, what are the cons? Obviously, the biggest one is it's obstructing the view of the mountains. But certainly, all that information will be laid out in a dispassionate, factual way. But I will say that the matter is not necessarily one which is neutral. It's not a case of, here's an idea, folks. What do you think? It's a case of, we've been working at this for 2 years because it was deemed to be a good idea. And we put together, here's the package we put together. We think this is a worthwhile project. These are all the benefits of it. Yes, there's going to be some costs. Biggest one is the view of the mountains. And people will have to make up their own minds as to whether they're for it or against it or have an opinion at all. But certainly, I don't see that there's any, it's not like we're neutral. We're not. We're saying this is a good project, and we're recommending that we do this. And these are the reasons why. So.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. You get the last word on this one? I mean, I suspect we're going to be talking about this every month.
Every month.
Well,
It's
I
only
mean,
gonna take
it's on
place.
an information piece. I mean, that's what both you and the CAO are talking about, is our residents are informed, and if there's a gap between whatever the step that the that CBA is doing.
Well, I guess if it's put that we're not neutral and council has a position from the previous council, then I guess I have to accept that. But that's the case. We're not neutral and we promoted this. Wasn't here previously, I guess, so I'll have to just accept that. But I would like us to be neutral, but we've made that decision already. We made that decision without public participation in my mind, and I think going forward we're going to do that differently. And for another time, I'd like to think we're in a more standard way of we invite public participation. I think we've got a good idea what that looks like. I think we need to be informed, we need to be standing, we need to be at the right times on the right matters. Didn't happen in this case, it happened in a different council. So I'll just have to accept the decision.
I think the genesis of the idea actually came from the Infrastructure Committee, and was bandied about for a while. I think I looked into a number of things and how does this work and what are the options.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying part of this discussion, I was feeling we needed to find that we should still be in that neutral position, but we're not. Telling we're not. We want it down the table, you don't put your hands up, everyone's giving you the same feel, we're not neutral. We've already decided, we know it's a good idea, we believe it's a good idea, decision was made. I think in the future, hopefully we can make those decisions with more public input than we had in this case.
Yeah, certainly, but I would hesitate to say that whenever we go to the public to consult on a particular issue, that we're always going to be neutral. It may very well be that a particular idea is one that we think is worth pursuing. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be there pursuing it, putting it out there in the first place. But it's not necessarily going to be the case that we're going to approach that kind of consultation from a position of neutrality. In fact, I would suggest that it's rarely going to be the case that we're not going to care one way or the other and that we're neutral. We're generally going to have a position, but we'll lay it all out in a factual way. Same thing, I mean, that's how we approached the referendum on the infrastructure, on the loan, was we definitely had a vision and a view, or council did, as to what ought to happen. But it was all laid out in a very factual way. What are the pros, what are the cons? You know, what do you think, folks? And people said, yes, 93%, we should do this. But we certainly didn't approach it from a position of neutrality.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And because Loon is slipping away from me, I'm going to cap the conversation on this. Thank you, Councillor Abbott and CEO, for the explanation. I'm going to break the agenda for a second because I forgot to ask. Public Works Manager, what was the official time that we went live in Harvey Creek today?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. and all is well?
All is well.
Top of Ocean, you have pressure again?
Correct, they were
Yes.
switched over. Yeah.
So the valves are all loosened or tightened or whatever we do?
Everything was completed by 6 o'clock.
Congratulations. A lot of months of slogging for you and the crew there. Kudos all around. Good?
One more question, are we gonna patch that cut we put into the top of the Ocean View there? Will we?
Probably not until the spring, summer,
Oh, yeah?
when
Okay,
paving gets.
so the guys were digging that up yesterday
Yeah,
for whatever they're
No
doing.
worries, it's gonna get washed out? in
yeah,
winter?
we're gonna have to keep an eye on it. I'll try and get a paving company in,
Okay.
but we'll see. Most of them are shutting down.
Yeah. Are you worried about your small dog?
No, it's just,
It's
it's gonna
gonna-
have torrents come down.
Oh, yeah, good point.
the area, so
Good point.
it's easy to wash it out.
Good, thank you very much. That's very welcome news, and I will steal that in my article this Friday. 6 p.m. and there we go. All complaints to you, of course. And back to the previous piece on the TransLink. Most of the work is done. Is staff going to put that out in the village update for Friday?
We don't have a launch date on those hours.
Info piece?
It's probably going to be June, but
Well, we still need to
we
bug
could
fight it
certainly
too.
provide an indication that that is the direction that we're going, if you like.
That would be yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes?
The info piece on the cell tower appeal, when did you suggest you were going to put that out?
I'm gonna work on the website text right away. I've already started, but hope to have that completed by tomorrow. So the sooner the better, so that people understand that. Because I don't want to be contacting everybody back and getting their consent to forward the information to SBA to make sure it's part of the
You've got
record.
open house coming from the 21st, and maybe the info piece is to attract attention to that, and remind people, whatever.
Mhm.
Could we see that, the council see that before it goes out?
Sure, I'll send it to you if you like. Send it around.
Okay.
Okay.
You good? Thank you. All right, so I think we're,
Robert writes it, but that's fine.
well, as good as you can be. There you go. Okay, thank you. And again, kudos, Works Manager. Okay, Mayor, strategy planning, the draft agenda input for 4 days from now, Friday, Saturday. Have it in, that way you can offset the 50 recommendations I put forward to staff. Agenda items, topics for discussion, anything and everything, yes? Councillor Abbott first.
There was the Friday deadline?
Apparently I put the 8th here.
Yeah, Friday close of business, does that qualify for the first of the morning of the next business day?
Have it in this weekend, okay?
Can we get over the weekend? That's what
Thank
I'm
you.
asking. I'm
Good.
going to get it by Friday. Weekend,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. And that goes to who?
To me, please.
To you? Sorry, I've been beating on you. All right, thank you. And I'll remind Jamie. Okay.
Just a question with respect to the village update piece regarding the transit.
Yep.
Did you want to
Nope.
put something?
No, actually.
You're not writing this week, or?
I am, but
Yeah.
I was going to be brief because I think the Remembrance Day is going to do a lot of stuff there. So I was going to let them have most of the show. I was just doing a bunch of tidy up stuff. I think however you decide, I mean, it's a lot of stuff here.
Well, I think it's just at this point, it would be a very brief, it could be a one-liner in yours,
How about
simply
it?
saying that, evening services.
You have been known to amend my drafts before. How about if I leave a couple of XXX's there and you fill it in for me? Okay, apparently I'll be waiting on that. Good.
Should be, it's November, it's a long weekend. So
Hmm?
is it the November 8th? It's actually a long weekend, so do they have until Tuesday?
Tuesday.
No, because I was going to be working on it on the
Okay.
weekend.
Okay,
That's why I
sorry.
put November 8th.
8th it is, hard 8th. There you go. You've only had
Maybe the
90.
9th.
You've only had 90 days to get it in,
Maybe
so
Saturday.
there you go.
I need a non-working day on
All right.
Saturday.
Okay, so I'm doing the TransLink
Saturday days.
strategy session. We've done tree committee. The CAO de Jong's work never ends. We have all been working hard to make sure that our volunteers are feeling appreciated and that their time is valued and that we can work for them when they work for us. To that extent, the CAO and I met with the chair of the tree committee, seems like yesterday, but I guess it was 2 weeks ago. And in a robust hour and a quarter of give and take, a variety of suggestions were made which would streamline the process of the application and enhance the turnaround time. So that's been documented by the CAO, is with the chair of the committee, who I'm guessing who knows what he's done, since he hasn't contacted me as a member, so I don't know.
No, balls in my court in terms of making some adjustments to our processes, and so we have to.
Wasn't he going to say yes to that?
Oh, he was going to consult with the rest of the members of the tree
Okay,
committee.
so it's in balls.
So I think
So we're moving ahead
simultaneously,
here. So
yeah.
this will come back to the council table, I'm going to guess in the next 45 days, one way or the other, with these modifications.
Yeah,
So
there's procedural and substantive modifications that are required, so yeah, it will definitely come back to council.
okay, and I'm happy to say that when the question was made, is the committee and feeling in good footing? The answer was yes, they're fine for the time being, so I'm hopeful this will enhance this. Good thing. Okay, next up, the RCMP meeting, which I attended. And I'll be quick about a variety of stuff that we talked about. They were as embarrassed as I was about the miles of lineup for the tire check 3 weeks ago. They did not participate in this at all. It was the integrated Metro squad that did this, and none of our police participated in it. We've asked that they give us a heads up or amend the time or whatever it is that they do so this doesn't occur again. We gave them kudos on their speed enforcement. I think most of us see the increased ticketing. I passed on the supplemental reserve constable, which we had tabled for 40 grand last year. I just don't see it happening this year, making it through the cut. So that was just thanks, but no. In combination with the community policing, they've had a personnel issue that they've corrected, and the community policing officer has now been hired, and in fact will be here at Remembrance Day. So this will be the liaison with the seniors, the school, and Crime Stoppers, Block Watch, the whole enchilada. So that's progress versus, I understand there were 6 months of nothing. I think we deal with the Inspector Triance, and I think the her number 2 is You know who they are, so I don't think there's any gaps in that. And that's it on the police situation. And we meet quarterly. If there's something somebody wants brought up at the next quarter, please send it to Peter or I. And and the last piece, yes, ASOD. Thinking ahead to what Peter and I have to do for the minister, I asked if the RCMP would be in favor of supporting us. They hemmed and hawed. Unofficially, they were supportive. Officially, they have to run it up the line because their policy is not to interfere in local government issues when they're fighting with the province. So there we go. Hopefully, we'll get them to say yes. That would be all me. Councillor Cunliffe, we're carrying her forward, which brings us to Councillor Barmare on the Infrastructure Committee and EV.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring forward some of the discussion from yesterday at the IC committee. So that's all right with you?
Yeah.
One of the issues is that the takeaway for the IC committee is to do a technology screening of what's out there and what's commercially available. So they're taking the lead on that. And we seem to be zeroing in on a location, which really kicks off our next step, which is a preliminary engineering exercise. So we actually got a proper site plan laid out and drawings that are meaningful for review, whether that's a technical review or a public review in the form of a review article where we show them what we're actually proposing to do. So that would involve starting to dip into that $5,000 budget allocation for this particular project. I think we could probably estimate anywhere in the area of $1,200 to $1,500 to get us to a preliminary set of drawings that can facilitate some civil estimates for the civil work and the electrical estimates, and also be a good communication tool in a view article for the public so that they know what we're signing them up for if we end up going down this path.
Sorry, Norm, is the sequence there, are we going to first hear back from the IC and then go out and do these drawings?
No, those elements are essentially the same for all the different offerings. It'll be a transformer and some kind of a dispensing unit. So those details can be worked out in the detailed engineering stage, but preliminarily we're going to agree on an EV fast charger, a transformer, and a dispenser in 2 spots, which was sort of the initial scope. So we need to take that to a level where it's a presentable project. We can actually say this thing has feet and this is what it would look like, and that's what I'm suggesting. And the view article, I think it would be a good tool to communicate the project, a set of tangible drawings that really describe the project in its essence.
So, if I've got this right then, so I know you're keen to move on this. There was 2 pieces. One, a decision on the location, and for many of us who were at last evening's meeting, I think you can address that. How are you looking to go to a motion for the location to be decided on?
Not without Jamie here. I think we should deal with Jamie.
So we'll carry that, and then that'll be the next meeting, and at that one we'll go with the starting on the design piece too.
Exactly.
So we'll leave that for you to bring up at the next meeting.
Just a question in terms of like designs and pictures of these stations that I've seen elsewhere, and some that I've seen in real life. For a level 3 fast charger, is it necessarily the case that you're going to end up with a great big box like what they're talking about, like what Carl was talking about at Horseshoe Bay?
Not necessarily.
Because I think I saw the same thing at Chilliwack when I was at a course out there, and it is quite big and takes up quite a bit of room, which also kind of plays into the location thing too, potentially. But I just wondered whether or not that big box is always necessary, or whether there's a different way to do it so that you can have a much sleeker look to the finished product.
So that's why the location selection plays into it, because you can look at the real estate around the location. So let's say it's not only 2 parking spots, but it's also an old placard, and there's a bench there, and there's some room. We have to determine where the property lines are. you could move the transformer out of sight, right? And just have the nice slick dispenser and two spaces, and it becomes quite a clean look. If you can somehow integrate that transformer into the renovation of the signage or map or some kind of information backing, you know, you can sort of multi-purpose it, which is why I think getting the architect involved and doing that preliminary design and giving people some opportunity to start thinking about those things and providing some feedback. So my suggestion would be we get this preliminary set of drawings, we kick it around technically, we kick it around to council, we address those concerns like the size of the kiosk, like what we might be able to do with that location to flush the design out. Because we need to start putting some stuff on paper in order for this to become a tangible project. It's by no means a commitment to anything, it's just it's a low risk direction to take.
Well, I think
We're going to
we're,
spend a bit of money, that's all.
Sorry?
We just started to spend a bit of money.
Which we agreed to
Which
do.
we agreed to do.
Yeah.
And a few things jump out when you talk about transformers. We're still close to the water. We should be careful, especially if they're oil-filled transformers. There's a riparian setback. I think there may be a little bit of due diligence we can do before we spend money kicking around some of the guys in the IC. We just feel there might be a few little hurdles there that we might be able to pick up on and not trip ourselves up.
But we still need the location.
We still need the
To
location.
start flushing it out.
Yes,
And then we cross those bridges. You know, you can do secondary containment if there's a spill issue. There are ways to engineer out.
okay.
But I do think we need this location formalized.
Okay,
So, just to clarify what Councillor Abbott just said, though, are you saying that you're concerned that the transformer can't be within a certain distance of a creek?
There'll be work to do. It could be a dry transformer, they're far more expensive. But there could be secondary containment, and there are creeks and riparian
These are
setbacks.
small transformers in the grand scheme of things. I highly doubt this is going to be an.
Oh, you guys are talking about a big box and we know it's a transformer.
No, it's
I don't
going
know.
to be a step-up transformer from the line voltage to, let's say, 1,000 volts for the charger. It's not going to be liquid. It's going to be an air-cooled transformer.
Okay.
all right, let's carry this robust piece on when it's on next meeting's agenda.
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to touch on, I'm not sure if this is the time to talk about it, but the concept of an in-kind contribution from Public Works on the civil element, some of the pad form work, I'm not sure if that's a thing we can discuss or.
Let's burn a minute on this one.
Absolutely,
Keep going.
Yeah, so because of how relatively simple the civil works are, because the transformer on the pole, we've got the power right there, it's essentially a pad at the foot of the pole. It's going to be pretty straightforward in terms of civil work. The thinking is that we get some value out of in-kind contribution from Public Works on at least the civil aspect. So now all we're looking at is financing the actual piece of equipment, and the rest is it.
With the location across the creek, wouldn't there necessarily be another pole? Because it's going to have to go from that pole to that pole down to the ground?
No, there would be a drop at the pole.
And
the
then
existing
underground?
pole, And then underground, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I see.
Good, so yes on PW's participation. Okay.
yeah, it's doable.
Well, you're batting 1,000. Good. Wish I could do that. Okay.
Well, I'm glad that we have a flavor for.
And just as CFO Rook, I have put a number in our budget discussion already for this, so we will make our call when Councillor Cunliffe's here, and then it's just like the Trans Lake Bun fight, we'll have the dollar fight in our strategy session too. Okay, good. And Councillor Rabbit, you're next up with climate action.
Yeah, so I just had to email something to the council and some of the staff, I think. It's been confirmed with a high probability that the wood burning bylaw draft will be coming to the November 15th Infrastructure Committee meeting. When we were at the council meetings last week, Neil Connolly suggested to me, why don't you bring a delegation? I hadn't thought about that, so I thought it was a good idea. Help drag this over the line. And then discussion with Project One staff there, when you start counting the days, realised that I had to submit it by Sunday because of the long weekend, and it's a 7-day working day rule. They don't count the day in and the day of, and suddenly it was like, can it be in on Sunday? I had to be in by Monday. So I had planned to bring this to council and discuss it, but I sent it to you all and drafted this up. It's, you have to submit a 2-page summary of what you're going to present, and you can talk for 5 minutes. So that was my 2-page summary, which I submitted with an application. I'm happy to receive feedback, suggestions, other things I can read into the 5 minutes. I don't have to read this to follow it. Being open as to what I can. So, yeah. I'm planning on doing.
Good, and there will be questions at the committee meeting, I'm sure. Okay. Any questions for Councillor Abbott on this?
Any suggestions?
No, I'm reviewing it. I think you hit all the key points. It was well thought through presentation.
Good.
The only question, do you get a sense of how many oil furnaces there still are?
It's one thing we didn't get from that survey. It's always puzzled me since. My feeling is very few, but I don't know that that's true.
I don't think there's still oil furnaces out there.
Yep, thank you. Moving on, committees, trees, views, and landscape committee, tree application number 96, which you will find on page 89 of 114. And the details are all there. This, I can tell you, having been there, I'll do the little background first. This is a myriad of trees along a walkway which is above one of our sewer pipes in Kelvin Grove. So this is a view enhancement issue, and the neighbors and perhaps the trailblazers may take this as an opportunity to build a short path should they choose to, but they do have some obstacles with brambles which you may have to overcome. Okay, on behalf of the tree committee then, at dead center, so it's tree application number 96, 45 Periwinkle. And it says requested the applicant is permitted to cut down the 4 cedars and 7 firs mentioned in the application. Must clean up and remove all associated debris. Topping is not permitted. Also to ensure that the trees are cut as low as possible to the ground. And thirdly, to retop the hedge on the edge of the easement and must clean up and remove all associated debris. I'll put that forward. Can I have a seconder? Any discussion? Call a motion. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Emergency services. Nothing? Just a place mark? Okay. CFO, I suspect this is your grant application? Nope. Nope.
It's
Yep. Nope.
basically fires.
Fire.
This
we would
is
assist with.
This is fires, and I've kind of actually been back and forth with the fire chief with respect to sort of the details as to what this looks like. I apologize for failing to print out that last. Oh, actually, he's just emailed me right now. What timing?
I like good timing.
So basically what he's come up with is a list of things that would comply with the requirements of the grant funding that's available. This is funding that's available to volunteer and composite fire departments to help them improve their capacity and resiliency through the purchase of new or replacement equipment that is geared toward the fighting of structure fires or wildfires, or for the delivery of training. Of course, as usual, with these ones, the overall grant management has to be provided by the municipality. So that's part of the resolution. The list that the fire chief's come up with is some Scott air masks, TIC chargers, Mark III pump, a bladder that's used for wildfires, Decontamination gear, there's a list of things that all adds up to about $3,500. So he's provided some rationales for each one. 10 small SCBA masks for interior attack structure fires, 15 medium SCBA masks for interior attack, TIC chargers, fire rescue, Mark III pump for creek seawater for structure or wildfire, the bladders for wildfire, and decontamination gear for cleaning out turnout gear after a structure or wildfire. So that all adds up to about $24,000 estimated sort of costs. The grant funding is up to $25,000, so we're just under that line, and we're recommending the resolution that you see in the material.
Councillor Bain, you want to put this forward?
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Okay, I'll second. Any discussion?
Yeah, is this 100% funding?
Yeah.
It is. Excellent. Yeah, no issues with
We still have
anything
to
existing.
fill out the application and get it in by the 15th.
Busy, busy, busy.
Yeah.
$0 of no argument against that.
Very generous of you to. And I see that the amount didn't bother you, either. Very good. All right, call motion. All in favor? Yes, thanks. And that's good. And as a peripheral thing, since we're on the topic of fire, these temporary water tanks that are scattered about the village, are they permanent? They're gonzo now?
They will be next week when we have time to take them down, drain them and take them down.
Either that or I could actually sell them and we could start painting funny little
No
faces on
thanks,
them.
they're ours, we need them.
Okay, just revenue generation, buddy. McLaughlin family bladder or something there. Yeah, it has a ring to it, I don't know. Okay, good.
I'm just wondering if maybe, I think my intent in reading that out was to sort of incorporate it into the resolution somehow.
So did he give accurate prices,
He gave best estimates, yeah.
assessment?
And we don't have to submit the estimated pricing.
And
It's just the items.
this is operational stuff?
I'm just
No, they
suggesting
said
that
for the grant,
perhaps.
if we put those things in, we have to confirm that it does come up to 25, that's all. Like they might require quotes and things. Because I wondered the same thing, if we should list that
No, maybe
in
not
the
then.
grant. There are a lot of things, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's pass on that. I don't think we need to.
Okay, moving on. Bylaws, of which there were none, and correspondence, and drum roll please, it's yet another quarter, and you know what that means.
Why does it seem my quarters are longer than everyone else's? No vacations in there?
Councillor Abbott, swing for the fence.
Okay. The first one, Township of Langley, intermediate ride hailing. I read this, it seems rather multi-layered. I'm not sure how it affects us. It was brought up to the Mayor's Council. Mr. Mayor, your chair, is there anything you can add to this, or
I would
receive
just mark this as received.
Okay. The next one on page 3 is about groundwater bottling. We've had this come to us before, at least I've read stuff like this before. Correct me if anyone
It's
wants
been,
to, but it's really not going to affect us.
I think it's been here 3 times.
Yep, so we just received it. The next one, the Low Mainland LGA newsletter, which is on page 8, not page 4, and all the numbering sequences after this will have to change as well. Newsletter's got a few headings, none of which I think really affect us. Call to action on global climate emergency. We haven't discussed this. It seems to be something that all municipalities are doing, and at some point we need to decide whether this is the kind of actions we take declaring this emergency. But I would say probably in one of our minds, but it's probably not for discussion tonight.
Okay, received, thank you.
And there was one other one.
The one follows.
There was a whole lot of them. There was a few. The other one that I thought, this Mount, I assume it's Mount Carey, not Mr. Carey. bus from Pendleton to Metro Vancouver. Do you know much about this, Peter?
Sorry, which one?
On page
The Civex?
Page 9,
Oh.
this First Nation participation, acoustic reduction, speed limits within reasonable boundaries. Then it goes on to talk about a commuter bus from Mount Curry to Metro Vancouver. Through the Squamish Regional District. Is this?
Oh, well, this is probably, yeah, well, so this was the initiative for the Sea to Sky Transit that I kind of had a hand in starting.
Okay.
But it requires the province to accept the concept of introducing a motor fuel tax to help fund it, probably in the neighborhood of 2 or 3 cents a litre. And it would only be charged in the communities of the Sea to Sky, not within Metro or at all. So,
there's no opportunity for benefit for us.
oh yeah, no, there would definitely be an opportunity, and I was in contact with the planners for both Metro and BC Transit when this was still a thing that everyone was working hard to try and make happen for 2019. To make sure that that bus stops in Lions Bay on its way
So
through.
is there anything we need to do now to be supported?
At this point, there's not really, I don't think there's really anything,
Okay. But it's on our radar, we intend to.
yeah.
Okay. The next one, which is on page 10, is just a workshop by the Innovation of Local Government. I don't intend to go, I'm not sure.
Well, this is up for grabs if somebody desperately wants to go.
Someone wants to go, they can have a look at the headings and the speakers there. I didn't see anything that affected us as Lions Bay, so it's other stuff. Page 12, I have written down, I want to write it in adoption November. What do I mean by that? Oh, okay. This is just the proclaiming November as the Adoption Awareness Month. Some action for us there. And number 6 is about, this is about RAC cards that we received about the management program. I'm assuming I don't know what we did. Did we put them somewhere? Or did we actually get them?
This is to do with the, no, I don't remember seeing, oh, I think we did get rack cards actually, they're on the front counter.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
No further action.
Yeah.
And the next one is a receive for information and regulation about cannabis production smells. I'm assuming we're not planning on cannabis production.
That would be a first. Okay, thank you very much. I'm always mixed when I don't see any resident correspondence, but take it that people are happy or they think they're informed. There we go. Thank you very much, Councillor Abbott, and I look forward to your next 5 reports.
Thanks for coming.
No break for Christmas either, sorry. New business, I have none. I don't believe there is any. And public questions, comments? Thank you. Then we're on to the closed, and I don't, unless the CAO tells me there's something else. So, for the hands up.
Yeah, there's something else. So topic B would be sale of 35 Kelvin Grove. Kelvin Grove Way, sorry.
Kelvin Grove Way. All right, thank you. Any other additions?
And that falls under the same section of section 91E.
Good. We're about to report out on some of this stuff. There we go.
So when you read the preliminary motion that council considers disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. It applies to both topics A and B.
To both. Thank you.
And at the bottom, the italicized portion, council does anticipate reconvening the open meeting
Yeah.
to discuss item
Yep. Agreed.
number 8.
A and B, perhaps. There we go. Who knows? All right. The proposed topics for discussion in the absence of the public, and there being none now. Let's read this out first. Borrowing of the CWWF Harvey Tank project and additional PRVs. The council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected in both of these cases to harm the interests of the community under sections 91E, and the second topic is the sale of 35 Kelvin Grove Way. That the meeting be closed to the public on the basis of matters to be considered under the following sections of the committee charter. 90(1). A part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following. E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements, if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. And N, the consideration of whether a council meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Second one.
The council anticipates reconvening the open meeting to discuss the following items.
Which is 8A3, the borrowing for the Harvey Tank.
Thank you. All right, and we are closed.
Okay.
Well, here we are at 10 to 10, and I'm sure this will only take us a second. It'll certainly be out before 10. The council is reconvening the open meeting. From the closed meeting, there is nothing to report. Still outstanding on the regular meeting is the request for direction borrowing for the CWWF Harvey Tank project, and the details of that are on page 51 of your package. And we had the motion, just to recap what it is. The motion, which was seconded and we went to discussion, was that fund the Bayview Road PRV and the Mountain Drive PRV through the balance of the CWWF grant and MFA borrowing, and add funding of the third PRV adjacent to the school via MFA borrowing, subject to positive public feedback. And we had tabled that, and the motion's already there. It's been seconded. I was in discussion, tabled. We are ready to go. So I will call the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Abbott opposed. We are carried. Thank you. And that brings us to the time of adjournment. What time is it, Pat? The adjournment time? I believe it's, 8 minutes to 10. There we go. Thank you. Good, thank you. Thank you very much. And if we can close, thank you.